All right, so we're diving into Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven today, and
Oh, classic.
yeah, and you know what's really cool about this one? You sent over a ton of analysis, historical context, symbolism, even some philosophical interpretations.
Oh,
Yeah, it seems like you're ready to like really go deep on this one,
absolutely.
which is perfect because I've always been fascinated by how this poem, I don't know, it manages to be both simple and incredibly complex all at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. It's that kind of blend of surface level spookiness and then these deeper, almost subconscious anxieties that I think keep people coming back to it even centuries later.
And, speaking of those subconscious anxieties, I'm really curious to explore this idea of the raven as a symbol, not just of death in general, but of the narrator's own psyche. That's something that really jumped out at me from the material you provided.
Oh, for sure.
Luckily, we have our expert here who can help us unpack all of that and more.
I'll do my best.
I'm particularly excited to get your insights on the philosophical interpretations. That's always been a bit of a puzzle to me.
Well, I think a good place to start is with a little bit of context because understanding Poe's world is really crucial to unlocking those deeper layers of the Raven. And you've provided a few sources that highlight his personal struggles, particularly around the time that he wrote this poem.
Right. Yeah, I noticed a lot of those connections in the material I sent over, especially the echoes of his wife's illness and the themes of grief and loss that just like permeate the poem. I mean, it makes you wonder how much of his own sorrow he poured into the narrator's voice, you know?
Absolutely. The biographical elements, they're undeniable, but it's also important to consider the broader cultural landscape of the time.
Hmm.
So, uh, The Raven, it emerged during the Romantic period, which, as you know, was all about embracing emotion, exploring the supernatural, and really delving into the human psyche.
Okay, so you're saying it was more than just like a literary trend. Like it was like the whole zeitgeist was shifting toward this um, fascination with the darker aspects of human experience.
Exactly. Think about the music and art of the Romantic period. So you've got these sweeping melodies of composers like Chopin, the dramatic landscapes of painters like Caspar David Friedrich. They all, I think, tap into that same sense of heightened emotion, a fascination with the sublime, even a touch of the macabre. It's like they
Right.
were all trying to capture something beyond the purely rational,
Right.
something that resonated with the deeper, often unexplainable aspects of the human soul.
That's fascinating. Never really thought about it that
Yeah.
way. It makes you wonder if the Ravens' enduring popularity is partly due to the fact that it captures those, like those timeless anxieties, those questions about life, death, and the universe that have kind of haunted humanity for centuries.
It's like he tapped into something primal, something that transcends any specific time or place. But we shouldn't forget that beneath those layers of symbolism and philosophy, the Raven is at its core a story,
Right.
and it's a surprisingly simple one,
It is.
which in a way makes those themes even more potent.
Right. And I have to say, the simplicity of that story, the way it focuses on just a few, key elements like the
Yes.
grieving narrator, the mysterious raven, that haunting repetition of nevermore. It's almost like a folk tale, passed down through generations, each retelling adding another layer of meaning.
Yeah, that's a great analogy
Man.
because folktales often deal with these universal truths often couched in symbolism and allegory. And in The Raven, I think that that deceptively simple narrative becomes a vessel for exploring those larger themes: grief, madness, the inevitability of death, the human struggle to find meaning in a seemingly meaningless world.
You mentioned the inevitability of death, and that's something that struck me as particularly resonant, especially in the context of the 19th century. I mean, back then, death was a much more constant presence, right? Like life expectancy was shorter, disease was rampant. People were constantly confronted with their own mortality. So this idea that death is inescapable, final, that must have really hit a nerve.
Oh, absolutely. Death wasn't some abstract concept. It was a tangible reality. And I think that awareness, that constant awareness of the fragility of life, actually fueled that romantic obsession with emotion and the exploration of, the darker aspects of human experience. It's like they were trying to grapple with those big questions, knowing that time was limited.
That's a really interesting point. So do you think that explains why the Raven still resonates with us today, even though our relationship with death is arguably much different?
I think it does because even though we might not face death as directly in our daily lives, those fundamental anxieties about loss, about the unknown, those are timeless and universal.
Yeah.
We we still grapple with the same existential questions, even if we try to push them to the back of our minds.
And that's where Poe comes in,
Yeah.
reminding us that those questions are there, whether we want to acknowledge them or not.
Right.
And he does it through these incredibly evocative symbols, almost like he's speaking in a secret language that taps into our subconscious fears.
And that's where the real deep dive begins, right?
Okay.
Because understanding those symbols is really key to unlocking the poem's deeper layers of meaning.
Okay, I'm ready to decode the language of Poe. Let's start with the most obvious one, the raven itself.
Right. It's right there in the title.
Yeah.
And for good reason. I mean, it's the most dominant symbol in the poem, and it carries a lot of weight, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And from what I gathered from the materials I sent you, there seems to be a lot of debate about what that raven truly represents. Like, is it death, darkness, evil, maybe a bit of all three?
I think it's definitely multi-layered. And what's interesting is that its meaning, it shifts and evolves throughout the poem, just like the narrator's own mental state.
Oh, okay.
So initially, the raven's almost a curiosity, like a distraction from the narrator's grief. But as the poem progresses and that, nevermore begins to echo through the chamber, the raven takes on this more sinister quality.
Right.
It becomes this embodiment of the narrator's despair, a constant reminder of his loss.
It's like the raven is both a messenger of death and a manifestation of the narrator's own inner turmoil. And that ties in perfectly with the idea we were talking about earlier, the raven as a symbol of the narrator's psyche.
You're exactly right.
Okay.
The raven isn't just an external force, it's an internal one as well.
Oh, okay.
It's a projection of the narrator's, his subconscious fears, his repressed grief, his growing madness. And that's what makes it so terrifying,
Yeah.
It's not just a spooky bird. It's a reflection of the darkness within him.
That's where it gets really interesting, and I think that's the perfect place to pause for now. Okay, so we've kind of established that the raven is more than just a creepy bird. It's a symbol of death, despair, and the narrator's, his own crumbling psyche. But Poe doesn't stop there, does he? He packs this poem with all sorts of other symbols, each like adding another layer of meaning to the story.
He was a master of symbolism, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And each symbol, it works on multiple levels, often intertwining with the others to create this rich tapestry of meaning.
Right.
It's like he's inviting us to decode this the secret language, one that speaks directly to our subconscious fears and desires.
And I noticed in the materials I sent you that one symbol in particular seems to spark a lot of debate. The bust of Pallas Athena,
Right.
the Greek goddess of wisdom. The fact that the raven chooses to perch on this symbol of rationality, right, in the midst of the narrator's descent into madness, it feels significant,
It's a brilliant juxtaposition, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it speaks to, I think, one of the core tensions at the heart of the poem, the struggle between reason and emotion, between our desire for knowledge and our inability to escape the overwhelming power of grief and despair.
So you're saying that by placing the raven on the bust of Pallas Athena, Poe is suggesting that even wisdom, even logic can't offer solace in the face of such profound sorrow.
That's one way to interpret it. It's
Yeah.
like Poe is questioning the limits of human reason,
Right.
Can knowledge truly comfort us when we're confronted with the ultimate mysteries of life and death? Or is there a point where reason fails and we're left to grapple with the raw primal emotions that define our existence?
That tension between reason and emotion, that was a key theme in Romantic thought, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't just about embracing emotion. It was about acknowledging the limitations of logic, the idea that there are some truths that can only be accessed through intuition, through feeling, through experiences that defy rational explanation.
Exactly. And Poe, being a master of the macabre, he takes that tension to its extreme,
Right.
He shows us what happens when reason breaks down, when the mind is overwhelmed by grief, when the boundaries between reality and imagination begin to blur.
And that blurring of boundaries, that descent into psychological darkness, it's all heightened by the poem's setting, right?
Yeah.
The midnight hour, the darkened chamber, the shadows that seem to envelop everything. Those are classic Gothic elements that create this atmosphere of unease and dread.
He was a master of atmosphere, wouldn't you
Oh,
say?
for sure.
He uses those Gothic tropes to create a sense of claustrophobia, of being trapped in this world where logic no longer applies, where the shadows themselves seem to hold a sinister power.
Right.
And it's within this unsettling setting that the Raven, delivers its pronouncements of nevermore, each utterance chipping away at the narrator's sanity.
It's like the setting itself becomes a reflection of the narrator's inner state, this dark and twisted landscape mirroring the chaos of his mind.
Right.
And speaking of interstates, one of the things that really struck me from the materials you sent is the idea of the raven as a manifestation of the narrator's subconscious. I mean, it's not just a bird. It's a symbol of all his repressed fears and anxieties.
It's a psychological reading of the poem, and it's incredibly compelling.
Yeah.
Think about it. The raven appears just as the narrator is at his most vulnerable,
Right.
consumed by grief and desperately seeking answers.
Hmm.
And the raven, with its single word nevermore, becomes this voice of negation,
Yeah.
a symbol of everything the narrator fears most. The finality of death, the impossibility of reunion with Lenore, the futility of his search for meaning.
So it's like the raven is giving voice to the narrator's own deepest fears,
Yeah.
the things he's trying to repress but can no longer ignore.
Precisely. And by externalizing those fears, by giving them form in this dark and mysterious creature, Poe allows us to confront those anxieties, to explore the shadowy recesses of our own psyches.
And it's not just about the narrator's individual psyche, is it? There's this sense that Poe is tapping into something universal, something that speaks to the shared anxieties of humanity as a whole.
Absolutely. One of the lenses through which the Raven has been interpreted is existentialism.
Okay.
The poem really grapples with questions about existence, mortality, and the meaninglessness of life, themes that were really central to existentialist thought, but which have resonated throughout human history.
Right. The feeling of dread, that sense that there might not be any inherent meaning to life, it permeates the entire poem.
Yes.
It's in the raven's pronouncements of nevermore, in the narrator's descent into madness, in the very atmosphere of the poem itself.
Exactly. The narrator is searching for answers, for some kind of solace in the face of loss, but the raven only offers this stark, unyielding truth, nevermore. It's like Poe is forcing us to confront the existential void, the ultimate unknowability of what lies beyond this life.
That's both terrifying and strangely liberating, isn't it?
It is.
Like acknowledging that void somehow frees us to create our own meaning, to find our own purpose in a world that might not offer any inherent answers.
It's an interesting paradox, and it speaks to, I think, the enduring power of the raven. It doesn't offer easy answers. It doesn't shy away from the darkness.
Yeah.
But in doing so, it forces us to confront those existential questions, to grapple with the mysteries of life and death.
And those mysteries continue to fascinate us, don't they? I mean, even centuries later, the raven is still inspiring artists, writers, musicians. It's like its imagery and themes have seeped into our collective unconscious.
It's true.
Yeah.
Think about all the references to the raven in popular culture, from films and TV shows to music and even video games.
Oh, wow.
It's like Poe's poem has become this cultural touchstone, a shorthand for exploring the darker aspects of human nature.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Why do you think that is? Why does the raven continue to have such a powerful hold on our imaginations even after all these years?
Well, I think it's because the raven speaks to something universal about the human experience. We all face loss, grief, and uncertainty in our lives.
Yeah.
We all search for meaning and grapple with the unknown.
Mhm.
And Poe, with his masterful use of language and imagery, gives voice to those primal fears and anxieties in a way that's both haunting and unforgettable.
It's like he captures the darkness that exists within us all, the fears that we try to bury, but that inevitably resurface, especially in moments of loss and despair. And I think that's why the raven continues to resonate, because it acknowledges those shadows, it gives them form, and in doing so, it allows us to confront them, to understand them, and maybe even to find a strange beauty in their darkness.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And it's that ability to confront the darkness, to explore the depths of human emotion that makes the Raven a truly timeless masterpiece.
But even a masterpiece has a story, right?
Mm.
And I think it's time we explore the legacy of the Raven, the impact it's had on literature and culture, and the ways it continues to shape our understanding of the human condition.
That's an excellent segue because the story of the Raven doesn't end with the poem itself.
Right.
It continues to evolve and unfold as new generations of readers and artists encounter its haunting beauty and discover their own interpretations of its mysteries.
We've explored the symbols and the psychological depths, even the philosophical chills that the Raven evokes. But what about its staying power? Why is this poem, written way back in 1845, still considered a masterpiece?
Well, I think it's because the Raven isn't, bound by its time. It speaks to something essential about being human, something that crosses cultures and centuries, those anxieties about loss, the search for meaning in a world that often feels meaningless. Those are emotions, we still grapple with today.
It's like Poe managed to bottle up those primal human fears and serve them to us in this, beautifully crafted, darkly intoxicating poem.
And he doesn't shy away from the darkness either.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't offer easy answers or sugarcoat the pain of grief.
Right.
In fact, he forces us to confront those harsh realities,
Yeah.
which in a way is incredibly powerful.
It's like he's giving us permission to feel those dark emotions, to sit with the discomfort, to acknowledge the shadows that exist within us all.
Exactly. In a world that often tells us to, suppress those difficult feelings, to put on a brave face and move on,
Right.
the Raven whispers, it's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel lost. It's okay to question everything.
And he does it with such mastery of language, the
Right.
rhythm, the rhyme, the vivid imagery. It all works together to create this hypnotic effect, that
Mhm.
draws you in and doesn't let go.
I remember that line from one of your sources, the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
It's such a simple description,
it is.
but it evokes a whole mood, a whole atmosphere of melancholy and mystery.
Oh, absolutely. It's like
Yeah.
you can feel the weight of those curtains, the stillness of the room, the anticipation of something, about to happen. Poe was a genius at creating those moments of heightened sensory experience.
And he used those moments to explore some, pretty profound philosophical ideas. Like
Yeah.
we talked about earlier, The Raven isn't just a spooky poem. It delves into those existential questions about life, death, and the very nature of
It's
reality.
almost like Poe is saying, here are some of the biggest questions humans have ever asked.
Mhm.
I don't have the answers, but let's explore them together in this dark and mysterious chamber.
And that shared exploration, I think, is what keeps the Raven relevant even today.
Yeah.
It's not a passive experience. It's an invitation to think critically, to
Mhm.
question our own beliefs, and to engage in a dialogue with the poem itself.
It's a dialogue that's been going on for centuries, and it shows no signs uh, of stopping.
Nope.
I mean, just look at the impact the Raven has had on popular culture.
It's everywhere.
It really
I
is.
know. Films, TV shows, music, even video games draw inspiration from its imagery and themes.
Oh, wow.
And that's not just a superficial borrowing of aesthetics. It's a testament to the poem's enduring power to tap into our collective anxieties and fascinations.
You mentioned one example in the previous segment, the Netflix show Wednesday.
Right.
It's interesting how they use the Raven as a symbol of both mystery and connection to the supernatural.
Yeah.
It's like a modern reimagining of Poe's original vision.
And there are countless other examples.
Yeah.
Think about the band the Allan Parsons Project, which named their entire album "Tales of Mystery and Imagination" after Poe's work, and even included a musical interpretation of The Raven,
Huh.
or the film The Crow, which borrows heavily from Poe's themes of revenge and the blurred line between life and death.
It's amazing to see how Poe's work continues to inspire and influence artists across different mediums.
It's true.
It's like his words have taken on a life of their own, echoing through time and shaping our cultural landscape.
And that brings us back to the question of legacy. What does it mean that The Raven is still so relevant today, still sparking conversations and inspiring new creations?
I think it means that the Raven is more than just a poem.
Yeah.
It's a mirror reflecting our own anxieties, our own hopes, our own search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain. It's a reminder that it's okay to embrace the darkness, to question everything, and to find beauty in the most unexpected places.
Beautifully put.
Thanks.
It's a reminder that the power of great literature lies in its ability to make us feel, to make us think, to make us question, and ultimately to connect us to something larger than ourselves.
And on that note, I think it's time to release this raven from its chamber and send it out into the world, carrying with it all the mystery, beauty, and an enduring power of Poe's words. I hope this deep dive has inspired you to, revisit the raven with fresh eyes, to find your own interpretations in its darkness, and to let its haunting melody linger in your thoughts.
And remember, as you wander through the chambers of your own imagination, don't be afraid to ask the difficult questions, to explore the shadows, and to embrace the mystery.
Yeah.
Who knows what hidden truths you might uncover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the raven. Until next time, happy reading and keep exploring.